Welcome, everyone, through all time and space to an all new episode of Weebs on a Weekend, a podcast where we break down the anime news highlights of the week and give a retrospective look at anime that premiered 10 years ago. Today's episode will be covering the news from the second week of July 2020 and give our thoughts on the status quo of the mech genre in 2010. My name is Jay Johnson. I'm a part-time weeb and full-time English language sensei. And with me, as always, is my co-host Sam Martinez, part-time weeb and full-time automail mechanic. How are you doing today, Sam?
Nuk Nek Johnson, Coach Mokhui, Jir, Bepiv, Ah.
Okay. I want to say that's Klingon. I want to say that's Klingon, but I haven't heard. I'm not a not a Trekkie, so it
No, you're
doesn't
right.
sound.
You're right.
Oh,
You're
really?
right.
Really?
Yeah, that was the first one you got
Wow.
right so far.
Hey. I kind of knew Gaelic before. I just forgot because it has less than a million speakers. And what was the other one? There were a couple you did, Sam, but I'm
Mhm.
doing pretty well. And the other thing, Sam, like I ask you how
Yeah.
you're doing, but you never say how you're doing.
Okay. Well, uh, I just want to gush a little bit about the Klingon thing. Because like there is no literal translation for like hello. So essentially, what I said to you was, "What is it, Professor Johnson? Are you well?" So it's kind of weird how direct it was. And I had an article too saying that Klingon that there are more native Klingon speakers than there are Navajo. And then I realized that it was an Onion article. But um like it seems like Klingon has been on the rise because one of my cousins, she's in linguistics, she has a classmate that was essentially grew up learning Klingon because of her father. So the native speakers in Klingon are on the rise. And as far as I'm doing a little bit better. Things have been a little bit rocky here in the States in regards to COVID and the Black Lives Matter movement, but it seems like, at least like with my life personally, things have been steadily evening out, and things at work haven't been as stressful as it has been. And now that I'm able to talk about anime again, things are a little bit on the upswing over here. How about yourself? Oh, but one thing I wanted to mention real quick before we get to the news. One of the things that one of the reasons that's helping me up on this upswing is the show Avatar. We mentioned before that Avatar was going to drop on Netflix, right? And
Right.
when it dropped on Netflix, oh my goodness, there was like this huge wave of new Avatar fans, and with all the Avatar memes that come with it. It's hilarious. I would have to say, like, it was probably one of the best things to happen in this time because you know as well as I do, even though it's a kid's show, it deals with some pretty heavy subject matter. And yet, even though it does that, it frames it with a hope at the end, especially with the ending of the show. So I would say it's probably one of the best things to have hit online where people can relate to it with what's going on outside of their home and like that's being portrayed in their TV show in more ways than one. And the fact that the TV show ends on a hopeful note, it also gives the viewers some hope that with what happens outside of their home, it can end on a hopeful note as well.
Right. Yeah. So Avatar is definitely a closer to their 15th anniversary opposed to their 10-year anniversary. So I don't think we'll
Oh yeah,
get around to covering it on the show. But I mean,
yeah.
Korra, Korra, did Korra have a um not subtitles, but like a Korra the blah blah blah. But anyways, Korra the follow up
If you're asking if Korra's
title.
streaming yet too?
No, I was saying like
Okay.
does Korra it's called Avatar: The Last Airbender? Does
Yeah.
Korra
Oh,
have like some kind of follow?
No, it's The Legend of Korra.
Ah, yes, that's it. Thank you, Sam. Yeah, so The
Yeah.
Legend of Korra is not as beloved, but I would definitely say it's definitely for it grew up with its audience, I think, in a way.
Yeah.
So like it's Avatar is like the shonen version of a story, and Korra is definitely the seinen or adult version of the story, in terms of, its anime genre titles. But yeah, because I mean, there's a lot of relationship stuff, like outside of like the kind of kid infatuation that goes on with Aang and Katara and some of the other cast members. Korra is more like adult centric. It's what you might feel very much falling in love with someone versus just like saying, "Oh, I wonder if this like thing will work out," what kids do. So I don't know if I prefer Korra over Avatar, maybe because I've just aged up and Korra kind of relates a little bit more to my adult experience. But like them together has this very nice complete picture that you really don't get with like a lot of series and their sequel series. But if you're talking about like the full Avatar picture, yeah, like recently the Avatar community's just blown up and like people finally discovered that there are books attached to Avatar that, because maybe people just watched the show and just went on with their lives. Like show's done and the story was resolved and didn't actually care about like what happened after the story because like the books like talk about what happened to Zuko's mom, what was like
Oh yeah.
Zuko's first like how did the story progress and what happened to all the characters like the year after the story resolved. So very interesting. I mean, there's comic books, there's like graphic novels, and the creators of the show. I forgot what else property they tackled, but that's the other thing that they didn't advise on Avatar, the live adaptation. That's the one thing. That's the one thing I remember that M. Night Shyamalan was like,
Oh
I got
man.
the gist of the story. I kind of got the understanding of the story. So like the writers came in as like advisors and consultants, but they weren't actually part of the writing room essentially. So that was the last thing I remember hearing from them.
Like it was very it was a very poor moment because M. Night Shyamalan, that was back in his heyday when he was doing good. And when he released that film, I had high hopes, especially because he did it because his daughter was a big fan. And I'm sure that movie would have connected him with his daughter a lot more had he done better or had he had the writers in the room with him. But I didn't realize that I thought the writers for The Last Airbender was the same people that did Korra. Because you could see the influence there and that they did mature the subject matter. And I would say I was a bit on the fence with Korra at first. I liked that they were making that they were making everything older, but I was also against, well, at first I was against everything being different because I grew up with Aang and I loved Aang and I understood that Korra was a different person. Her struggles were going to be different and I wanted to see more of a connection between her and Aang, but essentially it is Korra's story, so like they were trying to make it separate, and I would find myself saying, "Oh, Aang would do this, Aang would do that," but again, it's not Aang's story; it's Korra's story, and so I've begun to have more of an appreciation for it. But I still feel as though some of the writing in Avatar, at least the first 3 seasons of Airbender, were more solid than Korra was. I really liked the first season and the third season, but the other seasons I felt like they could have had a little bit more work.
All right, yeah. I mean, your love of the Avatar series is very documented, even though you didn't have any of the fighters in Avatar on your list of top fighters when we did that a few episodes ago. But
Well,
anyway,
well.
I'm very much,
Remember, it's an American franchise, so and I guess that's a topic for another
oh,
day on whether or not
yes, it
like
is.
we would consider that anime. But that's why I sort of like left them out so that
Oh,
we
okay,
wouldn't have to hash it up until we make that an episode or something.
got you. Okay, I understand, Sam, for sure. And I'm very surprised to hear you say like Avatar is like the kind of thing that caught your attention, even though Avon Evangelion released on Netflix this year as well. So that's a great segue into.
The news. All right. So with the news, I have 3 airing news, 1 visual release, 1 anime team up, 1 convention plan or update, and 1 bit of comic book news. So just to start things off, oh, another thing that made me really excited, especially recently, in this first bit of news, was God of High School was released on Crunchyroll July the 6th, earlier this week. And I saw it. Oh my goodness, the hype is real. I am looking forward to it. Did you get a chance to look at it, Jay?
Uh, can we talk about that in our summer watch list?
All right, we will do that. On to the next bit of news. I have Doctor Stone season 2. It's going to be premiering in January 2021, and they have images of some of the newer characters that are being released. One person seems to be a bowman, somebody who shoots bow and arrows. Another person, she seems to be sort of a more berserker version of the blonde lady or the blonde girl that's there. I guess is the main scientist dude's love interest, but she just seems to be more of a beefed up version of that person. And there's a third person that was released. He has a tonfa, and he still has a rock piece on his face, so he looks like an Arankar from Bleach. So that seems pretty interesting. Did you follow any of Doctor Stone at all, Jay?
I gave it the 3 episode test and it failed for me because I was very much,
Uh,
it wasn't that I was turned off of the series. It was just like, it came in a time, I believe it was last year that it premiered. And it
yeah.
was just in that space of not terribly impressed. It made my watch list, but given that the, school year started and I made this big transition to where I'm living now, it kind of just went under the radar. So maybe I'll catch up on it for the next season because all the memes that came out of Dr. Stone were so strong. It kind of caught my attention and everything that goes on with the antagonist of the story. I think it's very interesting. Everything that goes on with the relationship with the main character and father. I haven't been really spoiled to it yet, but
Yeah.
there's enough. It's like it has a very distinct look to it. It's very visually interesting for an anime. So definitely enough interest has built over time for me to revisit it whenever there's going to be a down period. Not that it looks to be a down period coming up soon, given that a lot of the spring anime has been relocated to the summer. So I still have to catch up
hmm
from spring anime that were on my list, but now premiering now. So whenever I get around to Doctor Stone, might be right before its premiere, which I think will be in the fall this year, Sam.
Doctor Stone, no. The season 2 premiere, it's going to be in January 2021.
Oh, you know what I was thinking of? I was thinking of Haikyuu. I was thinking of the second
Oh, come on, man!
chord.
How are you going to switch up the animes? Oh, quick sidebar. So talking about your love for haiku, I would also say like in this time, I fell into the food wars trap. So now I've been inspired to cook and make my own side dishes, and sometimes I have food wars on to get me pumped up to stay in the kitchen. So just a little bit of that. But on to the news. The next bit of news, I have the news Fate Stay Night movie, Heaven's Feel 3, is slated to be opening up in August 15th of this year. And it is the third movie of a sort of trio of the Fate Stay Night series during the Heaven's Feel route, where we've talked about different um what was the name of the games that we talked about? I think it was Make Your Own Adventure games, with that last episode that we did, Hokoki. And Fate Stay Night is a video game franchise that's similar to that, but it's more of combat based. And this movie is just a third in a series of films that is portraying a certain route in a franchise. Have you had a chance to experience any of the Fate Stay Night franchise, Jay?
I experienced again the Fate Stay Night series is one of those not multi-dimensional, but it has like multiple timelines that cross in certain places and don't cross in some places, and it's. I mean, I'm sure you could explain it pretty well if we ever get around to it, because which I think there was a movie that premiered of Fate Stay in this year, 2010. I think it was Blade
No,
Work Remake.
it was 2019. It was the second movie in this trio of movies. The first one was The Presage Flower in 2017. The second one was Lost Butterfly in 2019, and now it's this third one, Spring Song. Again, that's supposed to come out on August 15th.
Okay, that's why I was very confused because I never saw the sub, titles of those movies. I always just saw
Mm-hmm.
them as Heaven's Field. So I was like, why is this movie spread out over three parts? Because I just had assumed like it was an OVA series and just had multiple episodes, but no, it's like a movie series it's a trilogy. So it's not very, I think one of the main issues of Fate Stay Night is that it's not very accessible to a casual viewer. That even though you can watch a series very straightforward, you can just watch episode to episode to episode. It's just like so much of it is interconnected that very much you can't just watch one part of Fate Stay Night. And even when you say Fate Stay Night, you have what happened, what premiered last year, which was Grand Order, and it has like a big following with the video game or the mobile gotcha game for Fate Stay Night, since it's based on that property. So Fate Stay Night overall, I think this is a time for me to get into it. Actually, I was talking with you, Sam, about it. I'm
Yeah.
understanding it from an outsider's perspective, so it's very much more welcoming since I've kind of been numb to it by you.
I would like to think that I had gotten you somewhat interested, but if you're gonna start, I would say probably the best place would be Fate Zero, which is on Netflix, because it's probably like it's the events that happen before the game. So it's concrete, it's not changing, whereas as I mentioned earlier, it's a make your own adventure game, so like there's different avenues, whereas with Fate Zero, that's sort of unchanging because it pretty much sets up the whole premise of the rest of the franchise, and it's also
Okay,
my favorite. So,
okay, all right.
but let's see. On to the next bit of news. So this is the visual release bit. Dan Machi, which is short for "Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon?" They have released visuals for some characters for their season 3, and their season 3 is supposed to premiere in October of this year. And the character that was highlighted in this visual release her name is Wine. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. It's Weine. I say that mainly because she looks like an elvish character, so I don't know how particular her name's supposed to be said. And I'm kind of interested to see where season 3 is going to go. I've loosely followed this anime, and from what I've seen, it's been pretty fun. Have you ever seen much of this anime, Jay?
I have seen the abridged version of season one, so I kind of get a. I mean, those characters are completely different when they go very much off script for a bridge series. They can
Yeah.
kind of like take the essence of the characters and the relationships and kind of keep those intact, but dialogue wise, that is very much up to whoever's abridging it.
Hmm.
So I know the events of season one, and I understand somewhat of the mythology that goes on in that series. Is that the gods of Greek mythology have essentially families. They have like a cult that follow them around, or
Yeah.
essentially have a kind of symbiotic relationship. And gods compete very much in the aesthetic of the Greek mythology. That certain gods don't like each other or they love each other. And there's always this kind of presence of Zeus's children or mystery children going on throughout the whole series. So that's the extent of it. I've never been too invested in it, given that the main girl, best girl, has uh, Hestia.
Uh,
Hestia has this very alluring kind of look to her design. I'm like, oh, this is one of those anime, and I was like, okay, I'll keep my distance from that.
oh my goodness. Well, I would say at least give the original series maybe the 3 episode test. It's not necessarily for everyone, but it does take the dungeon crawling different route, as you mentioned earlier. You have these deities who have different families, which essentially these people who pledge their loyalty to the deities, and different deities treat their family members differently, and they explore that a little bit. And you follow Hestia and her one family member, which is somebody that she's enamored with. And the thing is, like, it's kind of unrequited. He likes her, but in a respectful way, and he likes a different person who is so strong. And the thing is, he wants to be strong enough to where he can be recognized by her, and so he gets a power that essentially he can grow at an exponential rate until he reaches his goal. And it's about their family and their exploits, and how they deal with other family members and their popularity. So again, I would just say maybe give it your 3 episode test, like from the regular standpoint, see where it may go for you. It's just like one of those, if you like it anime. And the next bit of news I have, Studio Trigger and CD Projekt Red are rumored, I think they're rumored or it's either solidified, but they're supposed to be
Edge runners,
making,
edge
say that again?
runners, edge runners.
Edge Runners? Why are you saying Edge Runners?
Oh, are you talking about the anime that they're going to create for Netflix, or between those
Yes,
two
yes, yes,
companies?
yes. The anime that was supposed to be created for Netflix. What's it called? You said Edge Runners?
Yes, edge runners. I am so hyped.
No, 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 no. That's fine. Would you mind at least like giving some back, because we've talked about Studio Trigger before, but do you want to talk
Mhm.
about Project Red and what they're doing?
Yeah, so they're kind of following the same route that they did for the recent Blade Runner sequel. I think it
Okay.
was Blade Runner 2049, where they
Yeah.
have like this anime world to fill in. They have this anime project to fill in like the backstory of the world. So the original property created by Mike Pondsmith was Cyberpunk 2020. So they're jumping the story ahead, like 50 years. So the anime is supposed to be the filler of what happened between what goes on in the role playing game,
Okay.
Cyberpunk 2020, and the video game 2079 or 2077.
Yeah.
So it's very much a Studio Trigger idea. That's kind of the idea that Studio Trigger was like, hey, you have this amazing property that kind of vibes with our aesthetic. Do you want to pursue like an anime and have some kind of cross promotional, since the video game has been delayed kind of later this year because it was supposed to come out. Oh wow, it's been a long time for Cyberpunk, but it's
It
been like
was.
rumored for since 2012. It had
Yeah.
official confirmed production in 2016, and it's been being developed for the last 5 years. This is by CD Projekt Red, who's the creator of the Witcher series. So
Oh, they're the ones that did the Witcher series. I didn't know that.
exactly. So that's why the game's taking so long.
Yeah.
That it's going to be this giant kind of mech city, like the city Mega One that's in the Judge Dredd universe, where it's just like a city that's completely enclosed and it's kind of just expansive. And you know how detailed City Project Red is with their side missions and their non-player characters. So that's what's taking so long.
Hmm.
And the whole point of Edge Runners, which is kind of the working title for this anime between Studio
Okay.
Trigger and them, is that it's going to be set following the path of, oh my gosh, there's so much detail. But anyways, sorry, I can go on and go on about this, but again, it's in
No.
Cyberpunk. You can have three different classes. Like you can work for corporations, you can be a nomad, which has no allegiances, and you can be a street kid where you have like allies with like certain gangs, and you're pursuing like transhumanism if you like. You can get a lot of
Okay.
uh, implants and a lot of customization, kind of on a level that you didn't get before in the Witcher series. So like, oh my gosh. So like you can even
Yeah,
design your
it's
genitalia.
so it seems like what they're taking the RPG elements and just having a ball with it, just giving you so much customization abilities and capabilities that you can do in the game.
Exactly. So like even the game is like getting a lot of high profile spotlight because not Nicolas Cage but Keanu Reeves is
Yeah,
like
Keanu
a
Reeves.
major he is a major player in the game, and I don't know if it kind of got overlaid in what I just said, but I just want to repeat it that you can design your genitalia. Like that's kind of the level of customization that they're
Why?
getting.
Oh my goodness. So like is it going to be like do we know if it's going to be a rated adult game, or even will it still have its mature rating even though you can have the capabilities to customize their genitalia?
As far as I'm aware, like the rating has been like clear, like it's the same rating as the Witcher series, which has always been mature because there's like a lot of sexual content, some explicit content, violence and gore, and a lot of
Yeah.
psychological elements that might players might find disturbing, especially since this world is set up in a way where, well, I don't want to ruin that since it's a part of the twist of the premise, but it's
No,
a
like
world
you
that's
said, it's supposed to
very
be
much
just very mature and dealing with heavy elements. I was just wondering whether or not, because there was another rating above mature that hasn't been used for quite some time, adult. And so like I didn't know if like that new edition of genitalia, if that would just push this game into the adult rating, or will it still have like that mature rating? But you know, you answered
right.
my question. So like it seems like it still have that mature rating with it. So I'm glad that you're very excited. I didn't know that you were following that news pretty hard.
Mhm.
All I really knew about Cyberpunk 2077 was that Keanu Reeves was in it, and it looks pretty cool. So, um, oh, did you know that the Silent Hills composer was going to be making the music for the show?
Yes, I did. Okay,
Okay.
so I was 3 a.m. for the press conference last week. So that's kind of one thing I broke. Well, no,
Oh,
actually, that was
you're
that
you're
was
in the clutch
no.
fan. You're there. Like if they were opening up like a midnight release, I feel as though you're gonna be there like 3 days before, just like camping, waiting for the game to come out.
I wish I only have a Nintendo Switch. I would really have to get a gaming PC if I wanted to really commit to that. But yeah, I actually had like for security reasons when I was on a little vacation, I had like only like emergency news. Like I had like
Yeah.
a filter for emergency news and like contact with my mother if she like hashtag emergency so I can contact her immediately. And
Hmm.
like that's one of the stories that popped up. So that popped up the first and so oh, CD Project Red is having an official press conference, and I was like, what? And I kept with my retreat and not connected with that, but I watched that this week, and again, it just pumped me up. So I'm very much invested
Oh
in this
man.
moving
Well,
forward.
just goes to show you, viewer listeners, he has this the news for this game on the same level as news from his mother. So just so you know how invested in this franchise he is. So on to the next bit of news that we have, Dragon Con. So for those of you who don't know, Dragon Con is probably the Comic Con equivalent of anime slash gaming conventions down in Georgia. If so, Comic Con is the biggest name, and the next big name underneath Comic Con is Dragon Con. Just so you know how well known it's over here in the states. And they normally do their con on Labor Day weekend, and with stuff going on with the virus or disease that's happening in the world right now, they decided to do a virtual con. So they're going to be hosting their convention online for the Labor Day weekend of 2020 this year, from September 3rd through September 7th. And they said on the Twitter that more events on the dates and the details will be shown on their official website. And I will say that it's pretty interesting that they're going this route when so many other conventions have canceled earlier this year. And it seemed to be a new trend that's going on, because I want to say there was another convention in regards to prosthetics that was happening in June, and they ended up hosting it online too. I think it was through Zoom or something in those regards. So it was interesting seeing other companies or other figures outside of my profession that was going that similar route. But what are your thoughts on that, Jay? Do you think that that's a smart move, or do you think that a convention is not conducive to the online world?
Well, right now, a lot of people are reaching out in that kind of vein of, be it Zoom or just Skype or just video conference in general. Like you see a lot of celebrities reconnecting. I mean, all they can do right now is just be at home and be in front of a camera. I mean, we've seen like over the past, what, 3, 4 months that there's been this exponential rise in bloggers and content online to just fill up a lot of space. So it just makes sense that if
Yeah,
you're having a situation with a panel, it's almost in the same feel of watching a screen and seeing like the people that you came to see to be in front of you. It's like you're losing the social aspect of it, like being next to a guy or being next to a person, period, that
yeah,
is loving the same thing that you love. And that's kind of what cons are about, is just sharing like this social experience together in this group of
hmm,
people of like-minded individuals. Maybe some are seeking this like comfort with people that share their same interests or hobbies. So like you're losing that, but you're still getting the content that you want. You're still being able, I mean, if they set it up in a way like to have like that ask line that they do at cons sometime, and like maybe queue up people and then have their camera show up and, you know, hey, guest, like do audience participation essentially. So it's a good compromise that I would definitely do this, especially now that it allows people from a larger audience, a global audience, to participate in cons where, going to Atlanta might be impossible for some people.
Oh, no, no, yeah, I totally get what you're saying. And when things open up again, like maybe those people that were on the Zoom call beforehand, now that they've experienced Dragon Con virtually, they may want to actually come physically, like once we get back to that level. And oh, this this is another thing that I've been exposed to during your retreat that I forgot to mention. But people, you know how bars would do trivia, things like that. So there was a website known as Sparkle that has been doing an online trivia, somewhat similar to what you were saying. You know, you would have like a panel of people, and then you have all the other quote unquote rooms in the Zoom call, and then the person that's hosting the call, they can interact with the different people. They'll put their picture up, you know, when they're speaking, things like that. And that was sort of what was going on with the different trivia's that was happening. So it seems like people have been transitioning to that, trying to make it more accessible to those who, yeah, to everybody, since you can't be there in person. So hopefully, at least by the time the convention happens, like they'll have a more of a set protocol, so that you won't have to spend like an hour trying to figure out what you want to do, or waiting for the tech person to figure things out, so that you can uh, talk to the panel or listen to them speak, things of that nature. So on to the last bit of news that I have for you. Marvel has released news that they are going to be releasing an Ultraman comic book called Ultraman Rises. and essentially it's supposed to be a modern take of the Ultraman series. And the writer for this comic book is supposed to be Kyle Higgins. He has written the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comic book as well as for the Winter Soldier. And this comic book is supposed to start going on sale on September 9th, which is also known as Ultraman Day, which is supposed to be the first day when Ultraman was broadcasted. I think Ultraman was broadcasted for the first time back in 66. I'm not sure. I don't have my dates in front of me. But seeing as how we're talking about Mecha, I figured that would be a good transition piece. And, just showing how much of an influence Mecha has on things outside of the scope of anime. Even though Ultraman may not be considered mecha strictly, but because it's within that still vein of like kaiju, such as big monsters like Godzilla, things like that, it's all lumped in together with Power Rangers, giant robots, and things of that nature. So it was interesting seeing that a big player like Marvel was going to take up a franchise that is big in the kaiju world and try to make a series out of it. What are your thoughts on that, Jay?
It makes the most sense given the world that we're living in right now that I think it's Blue Diamond Productions or Blue Diamond Publishing, like they stopped their publication run for, for reasons of, keeping with mandates of safety. So
Yeah,
it's kind of interesting that Marvel is acquiring, well, it makes sense for Marvel to acquire properties that they have in the past to increase their digital membership because you have like Comixology and then you have the Marvel and DC and all the brands and studios, not studios, but publishing houses under them to get more of a digital following because they still have a big revenue of physical publication that they pull in every month, but of course that has stopped for, again, obvious reasons. And it makes the most sense in a way of Marvel needs something else to going forward because what has happened with their release schedule is that it's been pushed back almost indefinitely. I mean, even when you said, I forgot which, Dr. Stone being pushed to next year or, premiering next year, that might even be pushed itself. But these Marvel properties cost, upwards of $500,000 sometimes, like, the Black Widow movie has been done
yeah,
for months, as well as Mulan was supposed to come out, Mulan is Disney, but Disney owns Marvel. So it's all kind of under the same umbrella, but
hmm
it makes sense for them to acquire properties to bring in more fans, especially if a lot of their content now is going to be online and, online is just opened up to the world and different readers that may open up people to different cultures. So it makes sense for Marvel to take that step, especially when they've done it before. We'll talk a little bit later about the Madhouse adaptation of Iron Man.
Oh yeah, I remember that. It was Iron Man and X Men too. What I don't know if they were by the same properties, but they did X Men around the same time.
Yeah, they did Wolverine and Iron Man as uh, Madhouse adaptation. So,
Yeah.
Marvel's not new to working with anime studios, so it sounds like a perfect combination.
So like I said, that was that my last bit of news. So
All
that's all I
right,
have for you.
perfect. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Sam. The news was great as always. So now we have a full packed episode. So we actually have four segments compared to our normal two or three. Usually we just do the anime news roundup and then our resurrect or revise segment. But because we are at the end of spring 2020 season and the start of summer 2020 season, where last week was kind of a preview week. It's not really the official start, but July 11th is really the start of the broadcasting season for like Tokyo Television, Tokyo MX, and Fuji Television. So this week is actually the start of the real summer anime season. So Sam, just
Yeah.
as a recap, quick recap, do you have any big thoughts about spring 2020 outside of every show that you were going to watch getting delayed.
It was interesting because of the delays of the shows that I had picked. I had picked up Gleipnir, which was one of yours, and I think there was another one, but it doesn't come to my mind right now. But essentially, Tower of God. I'm glad they were able to finish that. Oh my goodness! Just I can gush on Tower of God and Gleipnir. It's just I really like where the shows are going to be going, and I'm definitely going to be continuing following those franchises because of the way they portray the characters, the character growth, and the world in both of those franchises. With Tower of God, it's mainly how I would say like it does the shonen spirit right, and by the shonen spirit I mean something that you'll see like in Naruto or in One Piece where the main character is sort of affecting the world or affecting his friends. And I would say that Naruto and One Piece they don't do it very subtly. It's very heavy handed, whereas Naruto, like I think you might have mentioned before, he talks to his villains and try to get them to switch sides and things like that. But from my opinion, it's whenever I see it, it's like, oh, it's because he's the main character. Of course, they're going to change sides. Whereas in Tower of God, it's more subtle with the main character and how he affects the supporting cast just by being himself, and it's not very handed where it's just power of friendship, power of friendship, power of friendship. It was, and that smacking was me hitting my hands against themselves, just so you know. But it was essentially just the main character being himself, and the other characters getting an introspective look on themselves and wanting to help him because of who he is. Whereas with Gleipnir, it's more of like the history or the mystery of the world that's going on. Whereas a certain character has lost memories and stuff happens when those memories come back. So again, like I'm just waiting to see where the characters are going to go and how that's going to affect the worlds that that they're currently present in. So those are my thoughts on the spring anime. What about yours?
Tower of God season or series didn't even make my top 5 list when we talked about it. Wow, uh, a couple of months ago now. That that was not on my list because I wasn't familiar with the property. I knew it was a Korean manga or manhwa, but outside of that, it really didn't catch my interest because Crunchyroll hasn't really produced any original properties that have really been well received. So like I was very much in the mind frame of, oh, I'll check it out if I get around to it. And Sam, I've already told you, but I have watched the series completely through 4 times. I've watched it 3 times in the sub and 1 time in the dub. And the dub is so interesting because one of my friends is the translator for Crunchyroll. And what they did, as he was explaining it to me, is that they went from the Korean to the Japanese to the English. So a lot of the translation is what we call free translation versus literal. Literal translation is just a one for one recreation of what's written or what's said, while free translation gives a lot of flexibility to the translator to take somewhat of a creative means or
Okay.
even infer meaning. So it being translated from the Korean to Japanese, there's one level of translation, and then Japanese to English is another translation. And some of the messaging can get mixed up. And there's
Yeah.
only a few times in the anime that it kind of caught my attention because when you're listening to the Japanese, that you say, and you're reading the subtitles that are in English, you're like, oh, that's not a one for one because you kind of expect a literal translation, but sometimes something can't be explained in the language that it's being translated to. So they do a
Yeah, because of idioms or something like that.
exactly. So that kind of caught me off guard a couple of times. That's kind of why I inquired with my friend, like, what's going on? Because I knew he was responsible for that episode. And his first language is Japanese and the second language is English. So I was like, oh, that's
Oh.
probably what it is. Is that your mind kind of reorganizes information in a certain way, which depending on your native language. I don't want to
Hmm.
quote any studies, but just as a English language sensei, I'm familiar with that, especially when it comes to my kids. But anyways, I loved. Well, I watched it 4 times through, so you can tell that I loved it. But
Yes.
to get more about it, it's just that everything you said about the main character, this season 1 is actually a prologue to the story, surprisingly.
That was so surprising to me too. It was like at the end, I'm like, wait, no, they just did a Vinland Saga. This is a whole prologue? Mind blown.
Exactly, because yeah, if you're following the like 3 episode test that we do, he he reaches his stated goal in episode 3. So you're kind of on this edge of where is all this going if he's kind of achieved his goal, because it's like Naruto becoming Hokage in the 3rd episode of this series. You're like, oh, I thought that was his goal, but you understand there's complications. It's a very mature story, surprisingly,
Oh yeah.
for about kids and their trials to climb up the tower. So other than tower, okay, so if I was to put a pin nail in this, I would say that Tower of God, if it delivers over the next, there's over 400 issues or 400 chapters. So
Oh
that's
yeah.
approximately, so season 1 stops around chapter 72 or 74 with what happens. So like if every season, because Tower of God season 1 is very fast paced. So much dialogue, plot is jammed into each episode, given like 22. And oh my gosh, the music of the series. The director is Kevin Penkin, who did the music for Made in Abyss,
Oh,
and
he
his
did.
yeah his music is so on point throughout this whole series. Like there's mixtures of jazz and there's violin orchestras going on and like tribal music sometimes, where everyone has like their own special track. They have their theme music. I was just very surprised, and I was just listening to it. Okay, I was listening to the soundtrack of Tower of God 2, so I'm all in.
Wow. So you just turned into a major fan then, like almost fanatical.
Well, kind of, because I also read the manga up to the end of the first season, so I've read the manga and seen the differences, and I understand the community because the manga community has been waiting so long for adaptations of their properties.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that they're kind of disappointed since it's not a one for one adaptation, but they did take creative liberties that I see as that were necessary given how much goes on in the season. They just had to cut things. It's just a matter of fact of anime production. But anyways, this is the thing
So
I
so
wanted to
so
say.
so so real quick. After reading up to the point that you said that the anime covered, the cuts that they made, do you think that they were made seamlessly, or do you have problems with it? Mainly because like watching it from just the anime, like I feel as though it's complete. You say that like it was fast paced, and it was, but like it didn't feel rushed. So like after reading a bit of the manhwa, like and you've seen the cuts, you've seen the things that were taken out. Do you think it was done in a tasteful manner?
Oh yes, I understand. Yeah, so it had very sharp, like surgical removal things. Like they removed certain characters that complicated the story and were kind of like just extras. Like it filled out the world in a way, but again, it
Okay.
detracted from what was going on with Bam or Yoru or 25th Bam, different names for the main character. But yeah, so not anything like it is fast paced, but nothing was rushed, like you said, Sam. Like
Yeah.
everything, it's just leisurely read. It's like leisurely reading. It's leisurely absorbing. It's just so fun to watch, and every
Hmm.
time you feel like, oh, that's it, but you feel so satisfied that you might want to even go rewatch the episode, and that's very hard to do with the current anime climate. Is that like we're just so fast to absorb content that we're like, oh, I just finished this episode, okay, on to the next thing. But Tower
Hmm.
of God essentially pacing a way to entice you to go back because there's so much lore building, but it's not in the way at all, and the characters are so deep but they're so mysterious and they're intriguing in a way because there's like this main test director dude that very much feels like a villain, but at the end of the season, you're like, oh, he has so much foreknowledge about what's going on that it feels like he's like an outside viewer kind of messing with the story essentially. That he's
Okay.
just so high intelligent and then manipulative, but he's manipulative in a way that everyone benefits. And you're like, should I be rooting for this guy? Is he the villain? Like, what is his aim? And he's also insanely powerful to
Hmm.
powerful people that are already powerful. So it's kind of like, don't mess with him. He likes to play around. He's very much a trickster character. Wow, I'm talking a lot. But anyways, the thing I wanted to say at the beginning of this is that I would say right now, after I've absorbed it so much, that if they do follow through with this animation company or the anime studio, which is Telecom Entertainment Film, is that, out of the 400 volumes that get you about, 7 seasons, that if they follow through
Holy
with
crap.
that, yeah, if they follow through with that, and the story's not even complete yet. So if they follow through with that, I think Tower of God just is solid, has a place on best anime of the decade already. And
Oh,
that's how
oh, most
insanely,
definitely.
that's how insanely well it's just produced. But anyways, aside from Tower of God, Kaguya-sama season 2, very satisfying. Has a third season plan, quite near, like you just said, delivered on their edgy, kind of depressing child battle royale story. Food Wars got delayed until later, so only a few episodes were seen.
Hmm.
Listeners was a hot garbage mess. Uh, Brand New Animal by Studio Trigger, a very
Oh, I forgot that was the anime that I was going to talk about. I forgot about Brand New Animal.
okay,
But
yeah. So
yeah,
it's
go
not
on. You can talk about it.
okay. So another well done city, uh, outing by Studio Trigger. Again, I don't feel like the Studio Trigger fanboys are going to rally behind it because it's such a subtle story compared to other properties in their filmography. So I think it's going to be received like My Witch Academia
Yeah.
and Space Patrol Lulico. So I think it's just going to be in the middle of the Trigger, lineage. It's like really good, but they've done better and they've done worse. And those are all of my thoughts about Spring.
So like I don't want to I'll just like reiterate what you said about Brand New Animal. Like I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. But I can see what you're saying that like with most diehard Trigger fans, they it the story is not as impactful or as in your face as the previous ones were. It seems like they're taking a more subtle approach, and so with that approach, they may have the same reception as, like you said, some of their lesser known works. But from what I've seen, it seems like they're getting popular. They're getting popularity as well because I was watching Brand New Animal on Netflix with some of my cousins, and I don't know. I guess it was maybe their first time like really watching anything done by Trigger. So like they were really enticed by some of the Trigger tropes that was going on, and so I can see Brand New Animal being an avenue for new Trigger fans to jump on board.
Yeah, that makes sense, Sam. Especially with that they just recently had their movie, The Promain. So there's
Oh
a lot
yeah,
of
Promare. Hmm.
Promare. Thank you. Yeah, Promare. So and they're doing the follow up to the SSS Gridman series next year. So Studio Trigger has been in the flow recently. So I think a lot of more fans are going to come into the Studio Trigger fan base. But anyways, that was the spring wrap up or recap. So moving on into our summer 2020 watch list. And this is just going to be our top 5, like we've done before for our spring season.
Yep.
That is going to be 5 anime that we're interested in or we're going to keep an eye on, maybe give the 3 episode test to or pursue further or stop watching. But Sam, what's your number 5? Let's start off with you.
My number 5 will be Fire Force Season 2. And
Okay, so I
yeah,
forgot to explain that there are three things that we say when we're doing our top 5 or top 10 list is that we do a bench, which is it's not on the other person's list. So like if you say Fire Force and I say bench, that means it's not on my list.
yeah,
If I say yeet, then it's further higher on my list. So if I say we have to yeet Fire Force, then it's higher on my list than your number 5. And if I
really,
say Kobe,
okay.
that means you're spot on that we are matching in the same spot of Fire Force. And I'm going to have to say that Fire Force for me is a yeet.
Oh, okay. So I'm interested to see who took your fifth spot then. So, have we talked about Fire Force on the show yet? I can't remember if we did.
We haven't because it had a premiere date in the spring, but they pushed it early. They were very confident that they were going to get
Hmm.
delayed. So I did
Okay.
mention it in the terms of the manga's ending next week. But anyways, it's higher on my list.
Oh, talk about it later. Okay, or talk about it later. All right. So who's your number five?
Funny because I knew none of these were going to be on your list, Sam.
Uh,
So there's
you
actually
don't know that.
three ways. No, I know this because it's hentai. It's hentai.
Uh,
So it's a three-way tie between three hentais that are premiering. So all of these are in the same camp that they're all adult ecchi series. They're not hentai properties except for
okay.
the Titan's Bride, which I mentioned a couple of
Yeah,
episodes
yeah,
ago.
yeah. You did mention Titan's Bride before.
Yeah, it's a Comic Festa property. But anyways, these three, they are Peter Grill and the Philosopher's Time, Titan's Bride, and this is hilarious of a title, but it's called a Dokyu Hentai Heroes. So it is very interesting to me, and why these all take up the same spot is that they're premiering on Tokyo MX and Fuji TV,
Mm-hmm.
and these are broadcasting companies that MX we talked about had the interspecies reviewers, and they showed the
Oh, it's those people. Yeah, 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 yeah. They canceled interspecies because they got too hot and heavy.
yeah. So it's just amazing of the story that the anime industry seems to be moving towards a idea that all this adult content is okay now, and showing censored versions of it is okay for public broadcasting. Because like you have to think about, these are actually animes. These are premiering on Saturday morning cartoons.
They don't have like a segment like where we have over here in the States, Adult Swim, where it's like later at night where kids are quote unquote supposed to be asleep.
Well, they have like adult blocks, like you said, like kind of a uh like this time is for adults, but it's
Yeah,
not in afternoon or at night, because if someone wants to watch something, they'll just stay up and watch it. But anyways,
yeah.
so to talk about, I mean, just to run through these real quick because they're all Sentai, sen, sen, oh, Sensen, I'm messing up my kanji again, but the adult boys ecchi series. So
Yeah.
the Peter Grill one is basically the main character is being pursued by monster girls for his semen. That's actually in the My Anime List description of the show. That it's
Okay.
just right out there that he's in a committed relationship, but the whole context of the show is that girls are vying to get pregnant by him. So that's very NTR hentai premise, that the
Yeah.
cuck holding premise.
Hmm.
The Comic Festa one we talked about, Titan's Bride, is a BL story, isekai, where high schooler is transported to a fantasy world of giants. And then the last one, which let me just read you the premise, Sam, is that childhood friends Rito and Karura are heroes who, with the help of a device known as X or HX Eros, uses the power of Eche, which is H, and erotic power, Ero, to save the world from libido-devouring monsters.
Oh, I think I've seen like when I was looking for some of the shows to watch, like I've seen a show where it's like H dash Heroes or something like that, where like they have to look up, they have to find like so much energy that can that they call like H energy, which I thought was short for hentai, so that they can like fight these monsters and stuff like that. That's that same show?
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, it is. So by Studio Project 9 that they kind of do ecchi series. So like of their 24 series that they've produced, only 3 of them don't fit that. So it's like a kind of a perfect match. And
Hmm.
the other reason, okay, this is my last point, is that the other thing that caught my attention about the Peter Grill one is that it's by Studio Wolfsbane, which is, this will be their first anime.
Okay.
And if you look at the PV of this, it looks straight up like a hentai. And so, I am so in the mindset that this is their way to getting into the hentai industry. Like you have like the big leading companies like Queen Bee and Pink Pineapple. And this is such a subtle way to like get verification or to,
I don't think that there's anything subtle about this, bro. But I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying, though.
it's just a clever marketing strategy. But anyway, so Sam, what's your number 4 spot?
All right. So, just okay. You were right on your fifth spots. Those are all benches for me. So, my number four spot is season two for No Guns, No Life, and it actually came on earlier this week. So, I'm looking forward to it. Of course, it's a bench. Of course, it's a bench for you. It's a super mecha anime.
Oh no, I'm going to watch it, but we already talked about it, so that was
Yeah.
one of the qualifications of my list that I didn't want to talk again about anything that we've
No, no,
already
no,
talked
no.
about.
No, I hear you. I hear you. So, who's your number four?
All right, so this might be a neat for you, but it's a anime called Great Pretender.
Great Pretend. Oh, that one. Okay, so that's a bench for me. I meant
Okay,
to I meant to look at it, but I haven't had a chance to. And tell us a little bit about it.
okay, got you. Yeah, so very much. Oh yeah, you did bring this to my attention, Sam, and after I saw the PV, I was like, oh, this is completely on my list because the music director, which is Yutaka Yamada. He's a music
Yeah.
composer, and his ending theme for the anime is Freddie Mercury's uh, Freddie Mercury's version of "The Great Pretender," the song. So
Oh, okay.
that kind of what got me into it. I was like, I'm a big Freddie Mercury fan, so I was like, if he's going to incorporate that kind of musicality into it, then it should be a good series. But
Yeah.
anyways, the the premise of it is that these two Japanese con men get swindled by a higher level con man that works for the mob, and then they become indebted or enslaved to him. So it's very much a psychological gamble kind of show that is going to
Okay.
be much of, like deception and game playing. So very much in that. And the other thing that got me interested in that is by Studio Wit, or Wit Studio actually, who handles all the Attack on Titan and last year.
No, seriously. Okay. Now I'm more invested because I've only seen the trailers for it, and like it showed one of the characters being hung upside down on the Hollywood sign because he got tricked, like you said, and it seemed like it was fun, like hijinks stuff. But like now that I know, like the studio that did Attack on Titan did them too, I definitely want to check them out, see how it is.
Exactly. So all the episodes are actually already available on Netflix Japan. So if you have a VPN, you're free to watch it. But it starts, public broadcasting today on Fuji Television. So that's my number 4 spot. So Sam, what's on your number 3?
My number three, you've probably seen this coming, is Ray Zero Season 2. And that started this week earlier too. Oh, it's another bench. That's fine. I already know your opinion on it, so it's not unsurprising. But I will say the fact that they're starting to release episodes again. Oh, so excited. Oh, so excited. And like the way that they opened up this first episode, I was like, it. Oh, I don't want to say anything.
Are you talking about the Who is Rem line?
Yes. So I thought that they had perma-killed her because I think I might have mentioned this before. Because with his quote unquote save spots, right, where he kills himself and he has to go back in time to another point and get back up to it. Uh, in this episode, it seems like they perma-killed Rem, which is a character that you become emotionally invested in. And I was just like, no, 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 what is going on? But you find out that it's actual something that takes place was actually an effect of a villain or one of the villains that works for the one of the people that works for the main villain in the show. And so you're like, okay, we've we've seen this guy fought somebody similar to this before. He just has to work at it. And I would say, like, it also made me realize that when you become dependent on a mechanic, say, for instance, if you just depend on using save states, right? Having to go back and repeat certain situations so many times, you become dependent on that. So, like, it made me realize that Subaru, the main character, his spontaneity or his flexibility in newer situations is going to be hindered to that. And I want to see where if the show is going to address it, and if it does address it, like what it's going to do. For instance, because in what happened this previous episode, you realize that like his save state had changed, and so he's being thrown into newer situations that he hasn't been a part of. And seeing him in those situations, you see that his flexibility skills are severely lacking. So it would be, if they do focus on that, it will be interesting to see him get to a point to where he realizes that he doesn't have the power to use save state anymore, and to see how he would react from that point on. So again, that's probably just like a headcanon on my part, but I'm looking forward to it.
All right.
So,
Yeah, I see that. I see that. Again, it's not like, again, I can appreciate something without
yeah.
liking it, and I very much appreciate what ReZero has done. I mean, I think he's gotten a lot of people accustomed to the whole genre of isekai, and ReZero was at the very front of that, and it's very nice to see that they're still giving attention to its fan base because it's obviously still there. So
Oh
that's
yeah.
a bench for me, but you know, it's definitely an understandable choice to keep an eye out for. So again, it was on my honorable mentions last time, but of course it got pushed to the summer.
Hmm.
So my number three is what we needed from earlier, Fire Force season two.
Oh. Okay. Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You said that he was Yeet. So why did you put Fire Force in your three spot?
Yeah, so I am so enamored by David Productions. Are you familiar with David Productions?
No,
Oh, no, you're definitely familiar with David Productions, Sam.
I am.
So,
I just don't know it.
exactly. They're the studio that does all of JoJo's.
What? Nuh-uh. No. Lies. That's not the same studio.
You can look it up. I mean, they did
Oh my goodness.
They did Golden Wind, they did Crusaders. Is it Stardust Crusaders?
Stardust Crusaders,
And
yeah.
what's the other one before? Um,
There was Battle Tendency.
There we go, Battle Tendency. So I think the only one they didn't do was Diamonds is Unbreakable, but they've been basically known as the JoJo production company for like whatever however long it's been. But and
Okay.
everything that David Production does, they always put an emphasis on sound design. And oh
Yes.
goodness, if you listen to the sounds in season one of Fire Force, like all the explosions, the combustion effects, like everyone's fire power almost has this different mixing to it. And of course,
Yeah.
sound mixing and sound editing are like parts of sound design. And it's just a pleasure to listen to with that actually not being music. So that's the thing that really attracted me to season one of Fire Force. But I'm so hyped for season two because it's going in the same direction of Soul Eater. Of course, because it's the same author,
Yeah, yeah.
that they're building upon this lore of, this world where almost everyone's somewhat of a firebender, and non-benders essentially can basically become fire demons. They can just combust and
Yeah.
like become these like giant fire inhabitants basically. And they're building on this main character's backstory and how integral he is to being the savior of the world, and building on his family drama, building on his work dynamic with his coworkers in a firefighting company. Which, funny enough, that Fire Force is not actually what the series is called. Like that's a free translation, where the
Mm-hmm.
little translation would be Firefighting Corps, which I don't know which.
Because I know the English manga translation is different too. I think it was like the Fire Brigade Fighters or something.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's again talking the difference about being one to one translation versus just someone translating kind of willy nilly or just on their own uh, criticisms of it. But I'm so excited for the season because you get the progress of this world. You kind of get where it's heading, and you're just along for the ride. And that's kind of what this author is just known for doing. And plus, the manga is ending next week, so it's going to be a complete story. So the anime can have like the whole picture and kind of be more consistent if they're adapting some parts and not others. So looking forward to it. So Sam, your number
Yes.
two, one of your top two for the summer.
All right. This guy may be on your list, but we'll see where he lands. I have God of High School at my number two.
Yeet.
Really? Okay. Okay. So now I'm interested to see what your number two is now.
Oh, I'm so interested if our number ones and number twos are switched. But my number two is called Decadence.
Oh my goodness, that's a yeet for me. Oh man.
All right, so I think we should talk about God of High School first, since you mentioned it.
All right. So no, go on.
Yeah, because it's higher on my list, it's my number one. Because God of, not God of High School, but oh no,
Yeah, it's
Tower
God
of
of High
God.
School. Yeah. Okay.
No, no, I was just talking about Tower of God, but Tower of God got me so in the web comic hole of, is that like I went down the hole of like Novelist is the next Crunchyroll web comic lineup. So like we had Tower of God, now we have God of High School, now we're going to have Novelist, and there's other like very uh high level or popular manga along with like Solo Leveling, Killing Stalking. So like those are kind of like far fetched kind of dreams maybe in the future if
I
this
don't know. Like
trilogy of.
I've been seeing a lot of buzz about solo leveling recently. So I don't know if they're going to be picked up or not, or if the fan base is just trying to make noise for them to pick it up.
Well, I mean that's how it's going to get picked up if the fan
Yeah.
base makes enough noise. But Solo Leveling kind of has a little bit way more higher production value. So I see that Crunchyroll might not take that leap if these first trilogy doesn't really pan out in the way that they need it. But yeah, God of High School is going to be animated by Mappa Studios. Mappa. We talked about them for our
Yes.
spring lineup for big
Yes.
listeners, but they're known for doing like Kids on the Slope, Yuri on Ice, Dororo. So
They also
the
did
thing that,
Doro Hey Doro, which is the
yes,
one with the alligator man putting wizards' faces in his mouth.
yes, I'm aware, Sam. Thank you for giving me
Sorry.
PTSD. Anyways, yeah, so the series of fighting, it's in the genre of martial arts and fantasy because apparently there's some kind of mystical element. I mean, the show opens up literally with a dude, bit, sorry, I don't want to say the B word, but slapping his hand down on the island, anyways. But
Yes.
yeah, so it basically follows the story of Maureen Jin, and he's a Taekwondo specialist, and he enters this tournament to determine the strongest high school student martial artist, and like it's a kind of free form martial arts. There's like a kendo girl, there's like a bat do not chopsticks, but nunchuck wielder. And I am so hyped because if Crunchyroll just delivers in the same way that they did with Tower of God, then I am just going to fall so deep into Korean manhwa. I don't know if I'm ever going to go back to Japanese manga.
Dude, it's just like you said, it's sort of like opening up like a new avenue, sort of peeking behind the curtain of stuff that's always been there. Because as we mentioned earlier, like when we were in college, like we've heard people talk about Tower of God or God of High School at least, and those are the bigger names. Just it's just like anything else. Like there's going to be more to it, and I'm not gonna lie, like the first episode got me so hyped for God of High School, man. I would say like so far it's been a perfect taste of well, this is kind of too early to say because we haven't seen anything else, but I feel as though like right now like I've gotten a perfect taste of what the show is going to be. You know, like the right amount of action, the right amount of silly, and like the fact that like fantastical stuff happens and it doesn't take itself too seriously, but it takes certain situations serious enough, you know? And it's like that perfect balance. I saw some people mention that it was very much like Gintama. And I would say, like, whereas Gintama, it's mainly more focused on the comedy, whereas God of High School, there's a balance to it. Whereas whereas like it knows that it's being ridiculous, but like it doesn't go full throttle. It goes just hard enough to where it's like, okay, this is funny, but now this is story. You know, it's like we're going to be going this route, and I'm just really excited. It's going to be great.
I could definitely see that Gintama comparison because of the exaggerated faces and the physical comedy elements of it. I didn't look up into, I'm not familiar, or I didn't look into the director or any of the key animators, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of them worked on Gintama. But anyways, that's my number one. What's number one, Sam? Decadent? Tell me
Yes,
about it.
Decadence is my number one. So I saw a PV for this a few months ago, and with Decadence, I would have to say the way that I would describe it to somebody is it's like a mix. It's a perfect blend of Immortal Engines and Cabanari Fortress. And for those of you who don't know what the Cabanari Fortress is, think about an anime Snowpiercer, that show or that movie that was on Netflix. And basically, you're in this world where humans are on the brink of extinction, but they live in this mobile fortress, and they work with these, I guess, they're these beings known as gears, where basically the gears help protect the people in this fortress from these animals. I can't remember what they were called, but essentially the whole world is a wasteland and they're in this mobile fortress trying to find supplies and food so they can continue on living. And you follow this girl whose father was part of the group of humans that aided the group known as the Gears in fighting off these animals. And you flash forward, she had lost an arm in an accident, so she has this robot hand thing going, and she wants to go off and do the same thing that her father did. But she was put into this job where she basically has to help maintain the fortress that everybody lives in. And she's learning her new job and she's trying to get close with her boss in a respectful work kind of way. So that she's trying to be, she's a new person on the job and she's trying to be friendly, trying to make friends. And a accident happens at the job because of these animals that are coming to attack their fortress. And it turns out that her boss had experience in fighting these creatures before. And so I would say, like, with the show, it was just very fun for me. The main character, she is very expressive and very energetic. And it's sort of like a light in this bleak world that is their situation. Even when she's talking to her boss, he's just sort of like this nothing matters, just go do your work and go back home. He gives off that vibe. Whereas, like, just I'm at work, we don't have to be friends, we just have to do enough to do what we have to. Whereas she seeks relationship and she is definitely invested in her goals and her aspirations into becoming one of those fighters to help the gears. And not only that, but like just the craziness that goes on in the world. Like, I'm just excited to see the type of lore that's going on, like the stuff with the animals, because when the animals, whenever they fight, there's like this area where it's sort of like this anti-gravity zone that they sort of deploy. So a little bit like Trafalgar Law's power in One Piece, where he makes like this bubble and he can control everything in that bubble. Whereas these animals, they have this bubble that pops up and like everything slows down within that field. And not only that, but the freaking fortress known as Decadence, how it can freaking transform. It's just, oh my goodness. It's like, it also has like that sort of, what do I say? Like that sort of, I would say like everything, it has like that trigger, that studio trigger feeling where everything's over the top. But like in this show, it doesn't feel outside or it doesn't feel foreign to the work. It feels natural, and it, even though it is over the top, it doesn't feel like it doesn't belong, if that makes any sense. So at least like those are my thoughts on Decadence. What about you, Jay? Like what brought you, what got you sucked into Decadence, and why do you look forward to it?
Yeah, so the one thing that really caught my attention was the sci-fi action adventure tags of it, and I
Mhm.
definitely saw the Mortal Engines comparison because you explained about Kabanari Fortress, but about Mortal Engines, which had a not the best adaptation recently, but it's
Yeah.
a novel where the world's kind of post-apocalyptic, but cities are on essentially they're moving cities where cities now are just roving across the planet because there's no supplies. In bigger cities where London is the biggest in the world is that they attack smaller cities and there's a bunch of sci-fi elements going on. So I was like, oh, it's basically that since it's a moving fortress, the last bastions of humanity living there.
Mhm.
And the other thing that really caught my attention was that it's by Studio Nut, N-U-T, Studio Nut, and it's an original
Yes.
property of theirs.
Oh, really?
And yeah, so Studio Nut's not, I was believe it was founded back in 2017. It's only done Tanya the Evil, which is about
Yes,
the,
yes, yes, that's right. They did do Tanya.
yeah, the isekai where a salaryman's resurrected as a small girl in charge of a military brigade of uh, spell users essentially, and then Fooly Cooly Alternative, which is the sequel series to Fooly Cooly back almost 10 years ago. So those kind of
Hmm.
two things, like Studio Nut, they have like this. I don't know if they're part of Studio Trigger or if they're under the branch of Studio Trigger, but it definitely has that the physicality that goes into Studio Trigger. It's not bombastic like you would see in Kill la Kill, but it still has somewhat of that aesthetic. So I see that why you would make that comparison. So
Hmm.
those are the things that attracted me, other than everything that you just said. But I didn't. I only saw the PV, so I wasn't. I didn't know about the transforming part of the.
Oh, I'm sorry. I sort of gave like a recap of like what was going on in the episode. I didn't mean to spoil it for you.
Oh, it's fine. I'm looking forward to it now because now it might be more of a mech. It might be more of a mech. And that's a great segue into our final segment of the episode, which
Yep,
has been
yep.
a long time coming. So we're actually, for this episode, instead of our usual resurrect and recap, we are actually doing a genre spotlight on the mech genre in 2010. It's a very interesting subject to look into and talk about because if we're looking at the 2010s, there are like three trends that are very evident that have like a lot of uh, analytics behind it. That one, that the globalization of anime or globalization of the anime industry, where it be anime studios popping up all across the planet. America has committed more of that into their entertainment, or it's become a little bit more mainstream, especially with I think it's fandom, which is like the showing of a lot of Japanese properties or animes in like southeast or northwest, wait, sorry, southwest California. And the second being the rise of the isekai genre. Of course, isekai existed before it, but in the 2010s, that name was kind of codified as isekai, meaning other world. And then the third, which is so interesting, and we should talk about it in a later episode, but the
Yeah.
decline of the mech genre. So that's
Wait,
a very
you
much
said the crying of the mech genre?
the decline of the
Oh,
mech genre.
decline. Okay, okay.
Yeah. So, Sam, my first thing I wanted to talk about, like just to get us started off, is like, what was your first experience with the mech genre? So, kind of, what was your gateway anime or experience that got you into the genre itself?
It's sort of hard to really describe because, well, not really. I guess like as I mentioned earlier, how Ultraman, Power Rangers, like that's all get lumped into the giant mecha, or at least into the mecha genre. So when I was younger, I watched Power Rangers, and I've always liked that sort of stuff. And I would say probably my first anime into mechas that I watched was Transformers, and I just really enjoy that, watching Beast Wars, Beast Machines, and some of the different Transformer franchises. And I didn't get into many of the bigger named mecha genres until high school, mainly because, well, like my first one, I would say like around this. I started watching them around the same time. It was Gundam 00 and Gurren Lagann. I want to say I can't remember which one I saw first. It was probably Gurren Lagann. It was on Sci-Fi when they had that anime block. I think it was like Anime Mondays or something like that. And it was one of the later episodes where they were flying in when they were fighting in space, essentially throwing galaxies at one another, and just the prettiness of the animation and the action just got me into it and made me want to look into it. So it was from there that I had really solidified my love for mecha, despite the fact that it, like, I guess, yeah, it just really solidified my love for mecha, and so I've just been on the mecha train ever since. What about you? What was
All right.
your first exposure to the mecha series or mecha genre?
I'm glad you clarified that you're a lover of mecha. So, to talk about, you know, there's not a, I mean, I think there's a wide gap between where you stand with mecha, where I stand with mecha. And the reason I actually thought about this, about why I kind of got off the mecha train, because I was so deep into mecha when I was growing up. Because I would say my first experience with mecha was Wing Gundam or Gundam Wing. And it was when there's a very, well,
Yeah.
there's a lot of political intrigue in Wing Gundam, almost a lot of political intrigue across all the Gundam franchises, actually. But in
Oh,
Wing
yeah.
Gundam, I actually saw, not to ruin the series or even say what happens to the characters, but you've seen Wing Gundam, Sam?
Yeah, yeah. I've seen Gundam Wing. Yep.
Okay, so yeah, so there's a scene where one of the characters basically suicide bombs himself essentially. And that image kind of just stuck with me. And
Mhm.
that kind of what got me into that world of Mecha, the whole idea of these giant robots being piloted from the inside by a kid, and that's kind of the feature of what Mecha is. So
Mhm.
my first experience probably is like what you said. We grew up in the same, you know, kind of air of being
Yeah.
millennials, but also being little weeblets, I guess. And Beast Wars come to mind as like Transformers Beast Wars comes to mind as one of my first
Mhm.
mechas, as well as I was a big proponent of Toonami, so like Outlaw Star and um, uh, Big O were kind of like
Yes,
my
Big O
hardcore
was
mechas.
good. Uh-huh.
Yeah, were my kind of like commitment to that. But what got me off of the mech train was that if you recall that Gundam Wing actually had a movie called Endless Watch,
Endless Waltz, yeah.
and yeah, and that was my first time I committed to start building Gundam
Oh,
models.
Gunpla. Yes.
Yeah, Gunpla, thank you, thank you. And I remember like the defeat. It like it's really very much tied in my memory of the defeat of how much work goes into Gunpla. And I bought something that was way above my skill level.
Wait.
And
So did you what for people that don't know with Gunpla, like you said, there's varying levels. There's uh I forgot. There's high grade, which is like basic. There's master grade, which is the next level up, and then there's perfect grade, which is nearly like 1 to 1/8 ratio. Like the pieces are bigger, but like it's more in detail. Which
hmm,
grade did you get? Which grade did you start off with?
well, I didn't start off. I was actually building a lot of the. Did you say high grade is the lowest one?
Yeah, high
Yeah,
grade
so
is the
I
lowest
started off
one.
with a lot of high grades. Yeah, and plus the Endless Watch movie came out like way into my middle and high school career. And like
Uh
you
huh.
mentioned, Gurren Lagann, which came out in 2007. But yeah, so I had plenty of experience with building Gunpla, and then I just committed to going into the master. And the again, the difference between high and master, especially for this model, was just so like jarring. I was just defeated. Like I tried something and was just defeated by something I
No.
love. I think that was like one of the first times I was dejected by something I very much
Oh my goodness.
enjoyed. And
It
I've
can't.
kind of been off of the train ever since. And I'm firmly
Oh,
off the
don't say
train
that.
still.
Cause like
I'm firmly off the
uh
train still for, more concise and critical reasons. But Sam, you did bring up something, and what you were talking about is that the definition of mecha is very nebulous. Like it falls
yeah,
under sci-fi, but like what is like Sam, what is your definition of mecha?
my definition of mecha. Well, before I do that, just want to touch back on the Gunpla thing because I'm deep in the Gunpla world right now. I will say that like back then, around Endless Waltz, master grades used to suck because there was like more parts and like you had to like use like actual screws and stuff like that. So like if you try to do a master grade now, it's a lot more user friendly. So if you ever wanted to tip your toe back in there, but be but buyer beware because Gunpla fans call Gunpla plastic crack because of how addictive it is now. So little side note. But as far as what I consider to be mecha, it I didn't really start thinking about it until recently, a little bit before we started doing this podcast, because like at first I would always think that Gundam Gurren Lagann was different from Power Rangers and um, kaiju shows like Ultraman, things like that, just because of the terms of realism versus the bombastic or the over the topness of things. But it's kind of weird because, as you said, it's it can be generic. It can go from something as fantastical as Power Rangers, where it's like you just happen to have like this giant Tyrannosaurus Rex robot that just lives in this volcano, and like whenever you need his help, he like the volcano opens up and he comes running to you. Or it could be something that's hardcore and gritty, like uh, Cyberpunk 2077, or even thinking about other franchises like Detroit, where they're talking about androids, or even in Blade Runner, like what makes a human if you keep taking them away, or Ghost in the Shell, things of that nature. So at least with me, I would say that Mecha would be a work or writing that has technology in the sense, where like technology is used in a sense to where they can to where it can improve people's lives, or can affect people's lives, and it's can be seen as a change in social structure. So like that could include even altered carbon, I guess. Um, whereas like essentially like technology is like a highlight, and it can be used to sort of bring up questions such as, can bring up existential questions, or it can be used like, I guess I'm still trying to figure out that definition, but I can see that's where I'm headed in my definition for mecha. What about you? Being an old fan, having to look back at it now.
You sound way more radical than I thought, and I was expecting a more of a purist idea from you about what mecha is, because you sound, well, you added a lot more into it than I expected. So I wanted to read off real
Yeah,
quick just what the Library of Congress says,
the
what
Library
mecha
of
is.
Congress. They talked
Yeah.
about mecha. Okay, go on.
Well, it's the world's largest library, or
Yeah.
maybe one of the world's largest libraries. So it has actually a very expansive graphic novel section. So
Okay.
they're on their official website, they say the definition, or at least the definition they use, is that mecha is a genre of Japanese manga and anime that heavily features or focuses on the mechanical innovation of robots, cyborgs, androids, and space stations. However, with robots are usually the primary focus. So that's what the Library of Congress says about the definition.
I
And
would say
that
I
feels a
would
little bit,
agree with that.
yeah, it feels very much more like what you
Yeah.
said. And if you're looking at the scale of where someone falls on like how they define very nebulous terms, you can be a radical, you can be a moderate, and you can be a purist.
Hmm.
And I think why I've been so detracted from the mecha genre as a whole is that I have such a uh, purist idea of what mecha is, because mecha is under the umbrella of sci-fi, but like where do you draw the line between sci-fi and mecha? Like when does one bleed
Yeah.
into the other? So Wikipedia kind of has the more traditional or purist definition. So Wikipedia says mecha is a genre of anime and manga that features robots in battle and broken down into subcategories of super robot, where the
Yes.
robots are supersized,
Hmm.
implausible, and fantastical, and the other
Like
category
Power
of
Rangers.
right, and the other category of real robots, which are governed by realistic physics and technological limitations. So
Yeah.
that's
That.
kind of
Hmm.
what you call like the purest idea, that there are only two subcategories, that there's no addressing of androids or
Yeah.
cybernetics or space stations. It's just about robots fighting. And that's so limiting. Like there's a lot of mecha anime that doesn't fit into that.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah,
But
so I'm very much
I'm sorry, go on.
I'm very much in the camp of what you said, that mecha is kind of like an all-encompassing kind of term, but there's kind of these hard features that we can talk about. Um, but yeah, I'm definitely on the moderate
Yeah.
to radical side of it.
So as far as my preference, I would say I'm a bit of a purist in the sense that I like, as you mentioned, there were when it comes to mecha, there's two big subgenres, where it's like the super robot, and then there's a more realistic approach. I definitely do appreciate the more realistic approach. So, and from what I've talked about before, especially with world building and liking harder magic systems, like I can see why you would think that I'm more of a purist in that regard. But but the question was, just describing mecha as a whole. So to encompass all that is mecha and cyberpunk, I have to be radical in my definition, so to speak.
Okay, that's a fair and adult way to approach it. If you say if you love horror, like if you love the
Yeah.
genre of horror, but you're not scared by horror movies, is it still a horror movie? Because they're trying, because like if something's scary, or if something's not scary but it's called a scary horror movie, then is it still defined by that genre tag? And of course it is, because the genre itself, or the property that's in there, is trying to elicit horror out of you. Even though you don't get scared, there's still the horror tag on it, because that was their intent, for you to get scared. So the same thing kind of with mecha, and it's very much the purest idea of it is very much as a modern term. And I wanted to go a little bit through the history with you, Sam, of how
Okay.
mecha kind of became what it is, because it's so interesting. Because mecha is very much one of the three pillars of anime, where, yeah, so I think in just broad terms that these pillars are just like hardcore, robust bases of anime that is
Hmm.
first started in, like the early 60s, like basically war, post World War II, where they very much focused on sci-fi fantasy stories. So that's where mecha would fall in under. The Shonen Battle series, which is very much a wide range of things, and
Hmm.
the historical literary anime, where they were kind of retelling uh, the Edo
Yeah.
period and some other historical events in Japanese history, and kind of conveying that to a younger generation for them to understand.
Okay.
Back in the 60s, the first mecha, let's say mecha with quotes, because the first mecha anime was Astro Boy.
I was thinking Astro Boy.
Cool. Yeah, the black and white version. Are
Astro
you
Boy.
familiar with that?
Y-
Because I'm not familiar with at all with the black and white one. I'm familiar with some of the later
Yeah,
adaptations, but not the original.
I think the remake it came out, was it early in 2000s? Like it was in color.
Hmm.
And I remember because it was Astro Boy, and there was this other mecha anime too. I said like Gargantua. I
Yeah.
remember seeing Gargantua was in black and white, and I remember seeing that one alongside of older cartoons like Space Ghost and the Humanoids, I think is what they were called. It was these cave people that had superpowers, things like that. But no, like that's what I would think were the first mecha animes, where it was Astro Boy and Gargantua. And I knew about Astro Boy in black and white, but I didn't pay attention until he was in color.
Yeah. So like the kind of aesthetic that goes along with Astro Boy was kind of re-emerged with Mega Man, essentially. That,
Yes, Mega Man.
yeah, that whole idea of mechas, that like the machines or like the technology isn't evil, but it's how you use it. Like Hayao Miyazaki kind of carries that into his work, be it Nausicaa of the Valley, Howl's Moving Castle, that, or Princess Mononoke actually too, because like just because you have technology doesn't make it evil or good. It's like how you use it. I was thinking
Yeah.
about the creation of black powder, where it was used for one, fireworks, and then it was then turned into gunpowder and used that
Yeah.
kind of way. So that's kind of what the whole mech genre is about at the very core, at least at the beginning, is that technology isn't evil or good. It depends about how you use it. And that came out
Hmm.
in the 60s. Both not Mega Man, Astro Boy
Astro Boy.
and Gargantua came out in 1963. So the mech genre has been going on for a long time. And getting into the 70s, since like Astro Boy was kind of the big thing for Mecha in the 60s, that in the 70s emerged something called Mazinger Z in 1972. And this is when the concept of real robots was established and the idea
Hmm.
of what we consider as modern or the purest idea of Mecha is that it's a humanoid machine being piloted from the inside. That's where
Oh, I'm just looking up the picture of Mazinger. Okay, so I recognize this robot and like how he looks, but I never knew the name to it.
right. It's yeah, it's one of those things that has faded into history, but it's interesting to look at the history of Mecha because like all these ideas like kind of slowly rolled out because Astro Boy was a sentient android, and then Gargantua was a robot controlled externally, and then Mazinger Z was controlled from the inside. So you kind of see that progression of ideas, of concept and mecha that just weren't there at the beginning. All right, so rolling through the 70s into the 80s. I forgot what you called the 80s, but yeah. So this is kind of
Wait,
where
wait. So I thought Gundam didn't Gundam come in the 70s?
look at that. You're right on cue, Sam. Yes.
Hey!
Mobile Suit Gundam came out in 1979. That's why I kind of brought it
Boom!
into the 80s.
Oh! Wow. Okay. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so the reason that, yeah, so like the whole paradigm of mecha shifted in the 80s where now it wasn't about the monster of the week. It wasn't about fighting aliens or creatures or uh, other things. It was, now it became, mechs became about war. It became about the use of these advanced machines to, kill people essentially. So a lot of the ideas of like morality of war and what are these giant machines actually used for? Are they to fight against tyranny, oppression, against, unknown forces? That's kind of what Gundam brought to the party. It revolutionized the motif or themes of mecha. And the other thing that it
Oh yeah.
introduced was another main feature of the mecha genre now is that the pilots are just young people. And that kind of carries over from what happened in World War II is that a lot of children became children soldiers essentially to help out with the war effort. So that kind of transfers over again into mecha being a reflection of post World War II Japan.
Oh, that reminds me of Akira because the reason why you've seen Akira, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
Like the reason why biker gangs was so prevalent in Akira was because at the time bike gangs were becoming more prevalent, and that was a fear of parents that their kids would be swooped up in biker gangs at the time that work came out. So like that was interesting what you said about how children soldiers were becoming more prevalent. I didn't realize why they made Amuro or some of the other pilots so young was because of that, and it was sort of like a reflection of the reality at the time. Like it puts it gives me a new frame to look at everything now, and like now you just gave me a bit of a better appreciation for Evangelion just a little bit more and what it tries to do with the genre. But yeah, so
And the first thing that is worth mentioning about the 90s is that Evangelion came out in 1995, as right next to Wing Gundam. And it's funny that I didn't watch, okay, to be completely honest, I have not watched Evangelion yet, no matter,
oh
yeah, I know that's one of those big holes in my viewing
It,
filmography. But
it's okay. Like for me, I hadn't seen it for the longest, and when you watch Evangelion, there's two big schools of thought. You either love it to where you can't get enough of it, or you hate it. With me, I dislike it, but I can appreciate it. You know, like you said earlier, it's like you can dislike something, but you can appreciate with what it's trying to do. So like I understand what it's doing, but I really don't like it, if I wanted to be honest. But
okay.
it's definitely worth watching because of what it does with the mecha genre as a whole. With what I think you were trying to go talk about.
Yeah, it's one of those not even genre defining, not even oh, it's actually like media defining. Like if you talk about the impact
Really?
Evangelion has had, it's just been that influential standout premise or series that has kind of opened up like the West to the idea of mecha. It's been like very much incorporated into marketing across Japan. I think one of their Shinkai Sens or bullet trains like basically has all the logo of Evangelion on it. And the other thing about it is that it's so vast, the Evangelion franchise. Like there's multiple timelines as I understand. Again, I'm very much on the peripheral of what's going on in that series, but I've seen a lot of quote unquote gore that goes on in that series, and that's kind of what's been keeping me away from it.
Yeah, it's very much in your face about what goes on. A little bit about what you said earlier, how like with Gundam it like sort of highlights like the children's soldier aspect. This one with Evangelion, it sort of takes it above and beyond just a little bit, whereas it's more of it's done to give you more of a visceral reaction of and more realistic approaches, like when what you do when you take a kid and you tell him only you can get into this giant robot and protect the city, and how much stress and how nasty it is. And especially with the technology that's involved with the interface of the mech and the pilots, it just makes you have a sympathetic reaction to the characters and what happens to them physically and emotionally throughout the show. And not to mention that the writer for the show had a mental breakdown halfway through, and the show really reflects that as well.
Yeah, it's very much a production of a singular mind. I forgot. I think it's Hirano is the creator's name. I forget sometimes when it comes to short Japanese names, but yeah, in this
Let me.
period of the 90s, the time that we grew up, there was a very much
Mhm.
deconstruction of the mech genre going on. So we saw like Zoids pop up. That was another big property in the West. There was G Gundam, which brought
Yes. Oh
that
my
brought
goodness. I love G Gundam. It was so much fun.
that brought like the super robot back into like limelight. And then there was Ace Mobile Suit Team, I think, that it was a
Yes.
very much war centric Gundam where they kind of talked about the practicality of having these giant, essentially tanks on the field and what does that mean. Very much focused
Mhm.
on the weightiness of the mobile suits moving around and how do military units deploy in that kind of situation and all the very much explored like how Gundams work on a practical level. So very much a
Yeah.
deconstruction on the tropes and trends that we saw in the previous decades. So now we're into the 2000s, which I like to call the golden age of mecha. So like again, like we were raised in the 90s where it was a deconstruction, and then if it's a golden era, it's kind of like a postmodern, I guess. Again, using air quotes, what postmodern means is that it's more of a celebration or you're moving past the genre, kind of experimenting,
Mhm.
kind of to push the limits, kind of not keeping with trends or bouncing off of them. Kind of Evangelion kind of did that the best. So it feels very much in the vein of the 2000s, because in 2000s we saw, in 2007 you mentioned it earlier, Gurren. Actually, Sam, what are
Mhm.
the first two words in Gurren?
Tegen Toppen Gurren Lagann.
Yes, it's a four-word title that I always forget the first two of.
Yeah.
But yeah, that and Code Geass, which is the only manga series that I actually have in completion. Like that's how big Code Geass is in my mind, and kind of how it stands as like kind of the proto example of what good mecha is, because I like Code Geass despite it being a mecha. Very much like you said, love it or hate it for Evangelion, that can kind of be a casual mecha fan, but most of the fan base is very hardcore when it comes to mecha, because it's just something they cherish, they hold dear, and it's something that they identify with for whatever reason, be it these child soldiers that they grow attached to and grow up with, and getting introduced into this adult war or world of war and being used by adults. Like a lot of these motifs and themes are just relatable to people that view it.
Mhm.
And this decade also saw Eureka 7, Full Metal Panic, Gundam Seed, which funny thing about Gundam Seed is that it's basically pretty boys doing mecha. So if you think of like an idol show or a reverse harem, that's kind of what Gundam Seed is in my head.
So that's one of the few Gundams that I haven't seen, and I've heard that the same thing with Evangelion, that like there's two schools of thought on Seed as well. You either love it or you hate it. And I tried my best to watch it, but I don't know what it. I guess like you said, because it's Pretty Boys does giant robots. I guess because they were just so heavy on the Pretty Boys, I couldn't get into it, and it made me upset because like there was a lot of gunpla. Like I really liked the mecha design of the mechas in that show, and like there were some gunplas that I wanted to buy that was from that show, and I was just a little sad that I couldn't enjoy it, even though I enjoyed their machine design.
Right, I understand that. Because again, I'm not very much in the camp of mecha, but when you're looking at what what happened in the 2000s, is that Full Metal Panic was the high school
Yeah.
comedy mecha. Eureka 7 was the romantic or romance mecha. Gundam Seed was the pretty boy mecha, and the other one was Bokurono, I think, which was like a little bit more of a horror psychological take on mecha. So like in the 2000s, very much mecha just exploded, where like
Yeah.
in the 90s it was a deconstruction of like going back to kind of the roots of what made mecha what mecha was. So now we're finally in 2010. We're not covering the 2010s. We're just covering the year of 2010. It took us a while to get here, but now we're here.
Here we are.
Yeah, I know, right? So the thing I really just wanted to talk about, actually, let me start here, is that let me tell you all of the titles that came out in Mecha for 2010. So there's 25
Okay.
titles, and
25. Oh, okay.
I know. So, okay, maybe I should just summarize this actually, because we're running low on time. But anyways,
Yeah.
of the 25 titles that were released in the 2010, the year 2010, only
Hmm.
four of them had public broadcasting. So
What? You
yeah, I know.
serious?
Yeah. So
Nah.
dude, I always do my research. Anyways, so the four that had public broadcasting were Star Diver, Hero
Yeah.
Man, the Madhouse Iron Man series, and
Oh.
Super Robot Tyson. So those four actually appeared on Japanese television. The other ones were ONAs, which is original net animation, and OVAs, which is original video animation. So
Yeah.
OVAs go right to they don't get broadcast on television. They don't get streamed online. They just go right into the hands of people essentially. And then
I would say that is the direct to DVD that you want to get.
thank
The
you.
OVAs.
That's the thing I was forgetting. Oh, yeah, straight to video. And then ONAs, which are animations that just show online. They get released online for distribution.
Yeah.
So out of the 25 titles, only 4 of them were seen on public, TV for people to see, and the other ones were movies and specials. So of those
Hmm.
25 in the whole year, only, what's the difference? 21 weren't really seen by a mass audience. So in 2010, there was barely any Mecha, and that's what I found interesting in my research. Now, I don't want to talk about the 2010s, but in 2019, there were only 8 total
Only 8?
for that year. So where there were 5 like known series, like Iron Blood Orphans was showing, and some other titles, and then 3 were original properties. So if we're going to talk
Wait,
about,
so Iron Blooded Orphans hadn't, because I just have it pulled up in front of me, because Iron Blooded Orphans was in 2017, so you're saying that they ended in 2019 then for Iron Blooded Orphans?
no, they were like showing it. So I was looking
Oh,
at
okay, okay.
broadcasting. So
Yeah,
like what
yeah.
was
Go
being
on.
shown in 2019.
Okay.
So I mean, we're not going to talk about the decline of it, but
Yeah,
if
no, no, not
anything,
now.
yeah, if anything evident, I think that, just looking at the research, is that 2010 was very much a year where it was evident that something was wrong with the mech genre. I mean, like, if you look at, like, titles like Star Diver came out that year, Robot, not
Yeah,
Robot Unicorn, but, Gundam Unicorn came out that
yeah.
year. But what else like, you're the bigger fan, but can you, like, really recall anything other than those 2 that really stand out in your mind? I
I
know that's
was
a hard
just
thing
in
to
the
ask.
clutch. No, no, no. I was just in the clutch at that time. And like I said, like I was trying to look at the list on here. I see another Gundam show that came out. Mobile Suit. It was a Gunpla Builders Beginning. So now they're what just a little quick thing. Now what Gundam is doing, like they're making shows about kids who make Gunpla, and this was the first iteration of that show. And I'm trying to remember when it first came out, because what Gundam does, they have a YouTube channel where you can go and you can see some of their stuff for free on YouTube. I think one of them's Wing. You can't see G Gundam, but there was some other of their shows that you can go and watch, and a lot of them are the shows that are based off of kids making Gunpla. But you wouldn't really know about that unless you were deep into Gundam, like I was. And I'm trying to see. There was another franchise known as Macross that's about as old as Gundam, but it's not as popular. Basically, it's like Transformers, where like you can where you drive your fighter plane, and your fighter plane can turn into a bipedal robot. And I'm not big into Macross, but they have their fans, but it seems like that they're on the decline too, especially around that time. But those are really the names that really jump out to me during that time. And I would have to say the OVA Gundam Unicorn, that was sort of what solidified my love for the mecha anime. I think if I had watched that, I don't know if I would be into mecha as big as I am now.
Yeah, and that's kind of my point, that where are all the people that love this series? Because if you look at the my anime list, like the Gundam Unicorn is just rated so high, I believe. I mean, I think it's
Yeah.
considerably high enough that you were like, where's all the reception? Where's all the critical fame for this series? It's like it might make
Oh,
some.
well, they have a so I'm trying to remember when this happened, but in Japan they made a life-size model of a Gundam, and the first one they did, it was of Gundam
Unicorn.
Unicorn.
Yeah.
So like it shows the amount of influence that Gundam Unicorn had. Like they made the Gundam Unicorn before they made the OG original Gundam. So like that just says like how Gundam Unicorn sort of kept Mecha afloat, or at least like the Gundam franchise afloat around that time, at least until now. But like you said, like even though it did a bump, it definitely is a strong decline that's happening in the mecha genre.
Yeah, because I can only think of in the 2010s there was of course Unicorn, there was
Mhm.
Thunderbolt, there was
Yes, Thunderbolt, but Thunderbolt came out. I'm looking at it right now.
mm,
Thunderbolt came out in. Well, let me bring it back up. It came out 2015, 2016.
yeah, that's what I'm talking about. That the in the
Yeah.
10 in the tens is that you had Unicorn, Thunderbolt, I think Origins, and most recently the Iron Blood Orphans, and those are the properties that
Yeah.
kind of carried the mantle of Mecha.
Yeah.
And it's just
There.
odd that somewhere between the 2007 with Code Geass and Gurren Lagann, that
Yeah.
in 2010, like 3 years later, Mecha's almost nowhere to be found, and that's kind of my point. Is that Robot Unicorn is it's so like well received, but it didn't stay around. Like, sure, it got this giant robot built, but like, is anyone mindful of its place in mecha history? I guess is my
Well, I know that after the OVA was made, I think it was like a few years afterwards, they made an anime adaptation to it. Because I
mm,
watched the OVA, and because I am with stories, like if I already know what's going to happen, I'm not going to enjoy it, so I didn't watch it. But I know that, well, looking at the list right here, it reminded me like there were some other series that that Gundam did do. So there was a Gundam Age that came out in 2011, 2012. They tried to do the JoJo formula for Gundam, whereas like they follow like a family lineage, and it was interesting. I would say like the first season was probably the best one. The later two seasons were kind of fell flat, and the second show that I'm seeing right now is Gundam Reconquista in G that came out in 2014, and the aesthetic for that Gundam was a lot different from all the other Gundams at the time. But and that show was able to be finished, but it didn't get as much acclaim or as popularity as its predecessors. So I tried watching it, and for some reason I just couldn't get into it. I think it was because of the writing or the acting, but for some reason I just couldn't get into that series. So I think like it could have been like something as a whole like that was missing in writing. But if we look at some of the American shows like because they did Voltron and Netflix, do we know when that came out?
couple of years ago, so maybe 3 or 4 years ago. But again, we're not talking about the 2010s. But along the lines of 2010, again, the year 2010, is that
Hmm.
there was evidence, like of what you said, Sam, about them making more of a shift towards younger viewers, where, again, most uh, Gundam and Mecha franchises were geared towards older viewers. Like, they weren't really um, seinen yet, but they were definitely on the line between shoujo and seinen. And
Yeah.
like in 2010, they had like Brave Battle Warriors, which is a SD Gundam series, and they had the Double O movie. They had the Double O movie. They had Gunpla Builders, which was a special, and they also had this
Hmm.
special called Patriots of the Red. So like Gundam wasn't, it didn't disappear from the anime community. It's just that
It wasn't as strong or as prevalent.
exactly, and that's kind of my point. Is that 2010 and the I would say that the death nail in the coffin of Mecha was Gundam Unicorn, and that's why we're going to be talking about it for a couple segue. But anyways, uh,
Segway.
yeah, so that's going to wrap up our like introduction to the mech genre. I think we talked about the features, the tropes, the history of it, some about a little bit about our favorites, and we're coming from kind of two opposing standpoints. You're very much a
Mhm.
hardcore fan, I would say, Sam, and I'm very
Just a little
jaded
bit. Just a little.
as you stare at your Gunpla above your desk. And I'm kind of a jaded, not even a casual fan. I think the last, oh no, that's not fair to say because I put SS Gridman on my best anime list from 2018. So
But
when
that
it's
doesn't
well
mean that
done,
you like Mecha as a whole. You just like that series, and you
ex-
appreciate what they did with the Mecha in that series.
right, I like it despite it being a mecha. Same thing with Code Geass.
Code Geass, because I went to see the movie. They just recently released a movie, and I went to see it in theaters with somebody, with some friends of mine. One of the people that went with us, he hadn't watched Code Geass, and he just dabbled in anime. So, like, he probably knows he has seen robot shows, but he didn't seem to be the robot type, and he really enjoyed it. So I think like that was one thing that was strong with Code Geass, where it's like you can enjoy it even though you may not be the biggest mecha fan, even though it's knee deep in mecha.
It's pretty knee deep in mecha.
Yeah.
So for Gundam Unicorn, it's a very interesting case, and we'll talk about that for the next couple of episodes. Do a episode by episode rewatch essentially. So like we'll
Mhm.
start the timer and go into the episode, talk about what's going on. And before we go into that, we'll talk a little bit more about the Gundam franchise because it does get a little confusing given there's multiple timelines or historic lines essentially about what goes on with certain series and they belong on a certain line. And it's very easy to explain, but it does need to be explained to people that are unfamiliar. Cause like Iron Blood Orphans was a good gateway into Gundam. And that's all I want to say about that since it's in the 2000s. We might just make a whole episode about the 2000s or the 210, sorry, the
Yeah,
2010.
2010s.
Yeah, because there are interesting mecha that came out that year. We need to talk about Darling and the Franxx and SS Gridman. There's one, oh, I'm trying to think of the one that I love. But anyways, we'll talk about that later. So Sam, that finishes up
Oh,
this
yep.
episode. And have anything you say before we close out?
Get in the robot, Sinji.